What's up, fam? It's Darren from Push Black. You already know we're about building Black power, and it starts with us showing up in big ways. One of the most powerful things we can do is turn out in record numbers to vote. Every single one of us counts. That means you. You matter. And so does your vote. Let's make a difference. Together. Voter registration deadlines are coming up fast, but there's still time to register and be heard. Go to pushblackvotes.com to register or check your registration status. Coming up, Lou more on Black athletes and activism on this episode of Black History Year.
This Halloween, ghoul all out with Instacart. Whether you're hunting for the perfect costume, eyeing that giant bag of candy, or casting spells with eerie decor, we've got it all in one place. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Service fees, other fees, and additional terms apply. Instacart, bringing the store to your door this Halloween.
Black athletes try to influence us in almost everything these days. I'm talking about from eating greasy Taco Bell Supremes to buying economy cars they wouldn't be caught dead driving. And don't get me started on politics. Your favorite running back could be running game for a large corporation whose best interests depend on voting against yours. Take the NBA, for example. It was dubbed the world's wokest league after players spoke out against racism following the death of George Floyd. But as an increasing number of athletes use their platforms to speak on social issues, we have to wonder, just how much change can an athlete make? Can you sell shoes and social justice? Eyeglasses and equity? Or what do rich players with fame and millions really risk when they decide to become political? I'm Darren from Push Black, and you're listening to Black History Year. On today's show, we're venturing into the complexities behind Black athletes and activism. We'll unpack those moments that shocked sports fans, broke the internet, and just might have fueled a revolution. Now, joining us in conversation today is Dr. Lewis Moore, historian, professor, and author, and co-host of the Black Athlete Podcast. He examines how race and sports are connected, and his work brings history to life through the stories of Black athletes who fought for equality both on and off the field. That's the message behind his latest book, The Great Black Hope, Doug Williams, Vince Evans, and the Making of the Black Quarterback. So get ready for a fascinating conversation about sports, history, and the fight for racial justice. But first, some history with Lynn from Push Black.
It was 2007, and the Rutgers women's basketball team had reached the NCAA championship game. While they had fought hard to make it that far, they had no idea they'd soon face an even tougher opponent off the court. After the Rutgers team was defeated in the NCAA championship, radio host Don Imus called the team members nappy-headed hoes. Clearly comfortable with his multi-million-dollar position with CBS, he assumed his position was safe no matter how offensive he was. But the clout he got wasn't what he expected. A coalition like no other formed immediately. Activists like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, along with leaders from civil rights and women's movements, joined forces to take down Don Imus. They met with CBS executives who agreed to fire Imus. It's not about taking Imus down, Sharpton said. It's about lifting decency up. Imus's comment was more than just clickbait. It was peak caucasity to say something so degrading about Black women to a nationwide audience. Our community was fully behind that 2007 Rutgers team, and we still have the power to hold people who do us harm accountable.
What's up, fam? Before we dive into the episode, I have one small favor to ask. Please spread the word about Black History Year on social media. Podcasting is competitive, y'all, and the best way to grow is through your promotion. You can shout out this episode or share one lesson from it you found super interesting. Just tag us at We Are Push Black on Instagram and TikTok so more folks can access the Black history they didn't teach us in school. Your support means the world to us, and your minute of effort makes our hours of work worth it. So thank you, fam. Now, let's get into the show. How's it going, Lou? How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yes, indeed. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us about Black athletes as agents of resistance and change. But before we dive into the deep history of this oceanic topic, we want to throw out a fun segment at you, a true or false segment. Some of them are going to be blatantly incendiary. Some of them are going to be a bit comedic. Some will be a bit more grounded in history. And we really want you to provide just a one-word statement, true or false. Most of these, there's no real right or wrong, but we're absolutely going to circle back and unpack some of your answers here. With that said, how do you feel?
I feel good. So I'm ready to go.
All right, Lou. True or false? Some athletes really do just need to shut up and dribble.
Damn. False.
True or false, Lou? Philanthropy is the best way for Black athletes to be politically engaged today.
Damn. It's okay. All right. I'll go true.
All right. True or false, Lou? Babe Ruth had a Black Dominican daddy.
He's Black. That's all I'll go. I don't know whose daddy is, but he's Black.
Yes, indeed. True or false, Lou? Charles Barkley was right in his 90s Nike campaign when he proclaimed, "I am not a role model."
False.
True or false, Lou? The NFL Combine is a glorified modern-day slave auction.
True.
True or false, Lou? Sports allow Black people to reclaim their bodies from the white gaze.
False.
Ooh. Last one. True or false? Sports can be a tool for achieving Black liberation.
Not anymore.
Oh. With that said, I'm just curious, at a very high level for you, Lou, what does Black liberation mean for you?
No. That's a very good one. I'd say not even more because I think we're at a point where I don't know if you ever get that, right? So no matter where you're at, right? You use the word oceanic, right? And so we can substitute diaspora. So even if we're there, I just think the if we talk soccer, let's say sports and soccer, right? Even if we talk about all these nations in Africa have their own leagues and stuff like that, and they still deal with player drain, and they still deal with everything that goes on in European soccer, right? And or when you asked the true or false question about sports and liberation, I said not no more. I was really thinking about the Negro Leagues, right? And so if you look at some of the teams, right? Pittsburgh, Crawford's own their own stadium. Memphis Red Sox own their own stadium, and I think that's, if we're talking about sports and we're talking about liberation, that's that opportunity where you're actually owning stuff. Now these guys, I know I'm kind of talking a lot like in American sports that look, LeBron might be worth $1 billion, but or some guys like Russell Westbrook might buy out the block, or Magic Johnson might be a billionaire. But my guess is that connection, this is no knock on them, my guess that connection is tied into someone else's money. So, and some folks might say Black liberation might be Black capitalism. Some say you can't have that, right? You can't have capitalism and liberation at the same time. And you would see a lot of that in the 60s. But like one great thing to think about is Black athletes and Black capitalism. And so there's been attempts for Black athletes to use capitalism to free us, right? If we go back like 60 years, Jackie Robinson owned a bank in Harlem, right? And so that money, he's him and others are lending it out. It recycles in the community. Magic Johnson has bank and he has capital, but a lot of that capital is outside of the community, right? LeBron invested tons of money, but a lot of that goes outside of the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. you raised some very fascinating, sticky subtopics. We're absolutely going to engage this tension or perceived tensions between wealth accumulation and demand for Black liberation, and how this has been kind of really kind of shifting over the last decade or so. But I'll just bite my tongue on that for later. Thank you for that rich response, Lou. Really appreciate all the considerations that go into your work, into your research, and how you responded to those true or false questions. And with that said, one thing that I was super curious about in reading about your own particular history and your trajectory as a historian, I became curious about what point in your journey, in your life, just in general, did you recognize the relationship between sports and politics? Like, was there a particular person, a moment, or event that allowed you to understand the connection between these two spheres?
Yeah, to me, there's this writer Dave Zirin who as coming up as an undergrad and graduate student, I really looked up to his work, and now we're kind of colleagues. And I just did his show last week. I've done it a lot, and his work is so crystal clear about the connection between sports and politics. And so once I started to read that, almost 20 years ago, I wanted to do something similar, but just in my own way, right? We have obviously different writing styles. I'm an academic, he's a journalist, and so that allows me to write a different way, research different things. And so I would point to someone like Dave Zirin.
Okay, producers. Now, y'all know I done tossed that man's name out like 10 times. At some point, we got to create a panel and have Dave Zirin on. Thank you so much for lifting up his name, Lou. Okay, before we dive again into like this very particular history here around the relationship between the Black athlete as activists, why do you think it is that athletics, sports, competition is often served as like an avenue for pride and expression, maybe even agency across Black history in the U.S.? Like, what is it about sports and athletics that tends towards this kind of racial pride expression?
Yeah, so for me, it starts in the late 1880s, and I'll give you an example. So there's this boxer. I talk about him in my book, I Fight for a Living, shameless plug, which is about Black fighters and Black manhood, late 19th, earliest 20th century. And this fighter, Peter Jackson, right? And again, oceanic diaspora. So Peter Jackson is born sometime in the West Indies as a young kid, makes his way at around 14 to Australia. And in 1886, he wins the Australian Heavyweight Championship. Now, keep in mind, in the U.S., Black fighters aren't allowed to fight for the heavyweight championship. John O'Sullivan wins it. The Irish American wins in 1882. It says, "Look, I'll fight anybody in the world, but I won't fight a Black man." So anyway, you're allowed to fight in Australia. Peter Jackson is the heavyweight champion in Australia, regardless of race. But he realizes he wants to be a heavyweight champion in the world, so that means he has to come to America. And Peter Jackson comes to America around 1887, challenges John O'Sullivan, and Sullivan says no. But when Peter Jackson comes to America, I think there's this awakening in the Black middle class. And this is no knock on the working class, but we have the Black middle class's words. There's newspapers, and they fall in love with Peter Jackson. And I think in their writing about Peter Jackson, you realize something about the Black middle class and sports, and then Black American sports in general. There's this belief at this time, just in American history, about the power of sports, right? And so if you look at the 1880s, professional baseball has become a popular. College football is finally on the rise, and there's this notion about muscular Christianity and sports in general, that sports are a good thing. They build character. It's about hard work. It's about dedication. It's about all these things that in America you say this is how you get ahead. And so through Peter Jackson, the best fighter in the world, even though he doesn't get a chance to fight, and other fighters after him, and then some horse racers like Isaac Murphy, the Black middle class say, wait a minute, there's something to this about sports. Not necessarily a way out, as I think that trope says nowadays, but to prove yourself, right, to the American public. You say we're lazy. Okay, we have champions. Peter Jackson is the best fighter in the world. George Dixon's a world champion. So George Dixon's the first Black world champion. He's like 113 pounds when he wins it in 1890. Eventually you'll get someone like Joe Gans, 135 pounds, Jack Johnson. So you could point to those guys. You could point to Major Taylor, the cyclist. You can point to Isaac Murphy. And it's about fairness, opportunity, hard work. And the other thing about sports is that everything is it's supposed to be on the level. So if you look at boxing, when we step into the ring, we have the same size gloves. It's the same size rings. The time limit is the same. Everything's the same, especially in boxing. Nobody likes a mismatch. So back then, promoters wouldn't even put on a mismatch. So everything's fair. And so what Black Americans can point to is like, if everything's fair as we see in sports, then we'll get ahead. And that, I think, is the fascination with sports, because things are fair and we do really well in sports. But in life, things are unfair, right? You have racism, you have structural inequality, and you have to fight these things all the time. And so you don't get that opportunity to show that you're the best at it. And so I think that's why Black Americans fall for sports, and the Black athlete succeeds in an integrated space, right? It's Black versus white in boxing, or it's seeing Paul Robeson play football, becoming an All-American, stuff like that. That means something to folks.
Thank you so much, Lou. Originally, when you were speaking, and we're thinking about sports, it's like, wait a minute, was this the birth of Black excellence, or that way of thinking? But I love the way in which you kind of bring it back to this notion of fairness, and thinking through just racial pride with regards to competition, if all things were equal, in this kind of utopian microcosm that is sports. With that said, though, now I want to start kind of peeling back some of the layers of this history. So you mentioned Peter Jackson. I'm curious, who are some of the other earliest figures we can point to when we think about the Black athlete as activists?
So we could just do a quick timeline and walk ourselves through so there's like small guys. Like, one of my favorite is, there's this fighter, Harry Woodson. No, this one's Henry Johnson. I'll get it wrong. It's the mid 1880s, and he's boxing in New York, and he's about to go into this New York club, and they're like, yeah, you can come in, but your Black friends can't. And you know what he says? Fine. Did none of us come in, right? And that's it. And to me, that's a powerful move, because so many other people like, you can wait outside, right? The first Black professional baseball player, Moses Fleetwood Walker, after his career is over, he is a Back to Africa guy. And he spends a lot, people don't realize that. He spends a lot of his time in the early 1900s trying to get Black folks to go back to Africa, trying to raise money. Now, he never raises enough money. He never goes. But if you think about it, the first professional Black baseball player had seen so much racism, right? And he's celebrated as an athlete, had seen so much racism. He says, this is not for us, right? And so you have kind of those little stuff, and then you have like big stuff. Like, I think Joe Louis often gets overlooked, but if you look at Joe Louis in the tail end of his career as a heavyweight champion, so post World War II, Joe is talking a lot about politics. He tells Black people to register to vote. Now, this is obviously for folks in the North, just the way the South worked with restricted Black vote. He touted Dewey as a Republican president, in the sense that the Democrats wouldn't do anything for Black people. He talked about how he's against the poll tax. He talked about how he's against Jim Crow. In fact, he has this article saying, my biggest fight is going to be against Jim Crow, that kind of stuff. And he helps integrate golf. Before the PGA even drops its ban on Black athletes, Joe Louis helps integrate golf in San Diego. And then you have other athletes, like obviously Ali, Bill Russell comes to mind. Great example of him, 1964. He's putting on a clinic in Mississippi. So he actually goes down to Mississippi. Medgar Evers' brother fights him there after Evers assassinated. And someone asked him about the dangers, and he says, look, man, this is about freeing my people. So I'll risk my career and my life for this kind of stuff. Obviously, there's John Carlos, Tommy Smith. Did I mention Ali? Jackie Robinson is my hero. Jim Brown's problematic, really, when it comes to domestic violence issues in the 1960s. But Jim Brown's one of those first athletes to openly talk about Black capitalism, or what he would call green power. And one way to think about it is he had this Black labor movement, and he got over 100 Black athletes to be part of this movement, where they are investing their money in, we're talking about liberation, in Black businesses, in areas. And so the most successful program was actually in Kansas City with the Chiefs, and they had Black athletes owning franchises. They had one guy partly owning a bank, right? And so we've had this history of activism, and then it kind of slowly stops, right? I think the success of OJ in the 1970s teach Black athletes a different model. The success of MJ, so Michael Jordan, teach athletes a different model, and then you'll see eventually guys like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Craig Hodges, Kaepernick, and then whatever in the stuff that we have today. But I think a lot of the stuff we have today, since we're talking about Black capitalism, is surrounding around that, whether it's philanthropy, as you mentioned, or Black capitalism as a way for activism.
Where'd you get those shoes? Easy. They're from DSW. Because DSW has the exact right shoes for whatever you're into right now. You know, like the sneakers that make office hours feel like happy hour, or the boots that turn grocery aisles into runways. Basically, DSW has all the styles that show off the many sides of you, from daydreamer to multitasker and everything in between. Because you do it all, in really great shoes, of course. And your style can't be defined by just one pair. Lucky for you, DSW has tons of options, so you can turn any mood into a whole look. Find the latest shoes and must-own trends for everything you do, from the brands you love, like Nike, UGG, Birkenstock, Adidas, Steve Madden, and more. Oh, and they just so happen to be the perfect price. Find a shoe for every you at your DSW store and always at dsw.com.
Feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
One thing that comes up for me, Lou, I'm curious, just thinking about Black women's critical but often overlooked role in the history of sports activism. Are there a few names, a few figures that we should lift up here as well? Just a few that come to my mind, thinking about Wilma Rudolph, Rose Robinson, most recently, Raven Saunders at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, or even like Allison Felix, right? Battling for maternity protection from Nike. Are there any other kind of Black women we should be uplifting here when thinking about sports and activism?
Yeah. So real quick on I talk about Rose Robinson, it really as the figure as this kind of Black protest movement when it comes to athletes, the ones who are done with the situation, right? So there's different types of activism, and then there's that activism where we see where the athletes like, I want nothing to do with any of this because you're just using me. And so Rose, for your listeners, if you don't know, Rose was a member of CORE, so Congress of Racial Equality, before she was an athlete. She's a decent high jumper. In the late 1950s, she qualifies to what we'd call be part of the Goodwill Games, right? U.S. versus Russia. And she said, I'm not going, right? Because these politics aren't my politics. And you're just going to use me as a pawn. And I don't believe in what's going on. You know, she's not saying the Cold War, but now we call it the Cold War, right? And eventually she gets arrested for not paying her taxes. And the reason why she's not paying her taxes is because she says, I don't want my money to go to war. I want it to come here and stay in my community, right? And so she is the parent of all this athlete activism, even though we don't give her credit. Wilma Rudolph, as you mentioned, 1963, she's in Clarksville, Tennessee. She leads the sit-in movement, right? And so if you think about it, in 1960, after she wins 3 gold medals, they give her a key to the city. 3 years later, she can't go in some of these restaurants, right? So she's going to lead a sit-in movement. I often think about Serena Williams, what the work she's done, talking about police brutality and other aspects. Simone Biles, mental health. As you mentioned, Allison Felix, I think is really big what she did with paternity, right? We don't actually talk about athletes in that sense. And then currently you have some like Renee Montgomery, who played for the Atlanta Dream. Now she's part owner of Atlanta Dream. And she's one of these leaders with the W in 2020 when they had the Vote Warnock campaign, right? And so not even just saying her name, but all of the W, right? Kind of leading that fight. And I think even today, like as we speak, the W really speaking about racism and misogyny that we see right now as we speak with the W speaking out. Whereas I'm not saying other leagues don't do it, but it seems a lot more vocal where these players will say, we're absolutely not dealing with any of this.
Thank you, Lou. Right now, I want to transition to another subtopic. Particularly, want to think about this notion of reclaiming the Black body through sports. Often, when this kind of framing comes up, I immediately jump to like economics and exploitation. With that said, I'm curious, how have Black athletes reclaimed control over their bodies? Or would you say they even have, through their athletic careers? You mentioned some of the kind of financial dealings of some of the superstar athletes across many different fields. Another thing that comes to mind here is, I guess, the NIL fields, the name, image, and likeness for college athletes. Yeah. What do you have to say around the reclamation of the Black body through sports? Does it only happen through capital, or is there anything else there happening?
Well, I think, non-capital, I think the biggest thing ever was in the early 1960s, a young Cassius Clay / Muhammad Ali saying, "I'm pretty," right? Like, and how many people had heard? So if we think about the history of how America treats Black folks, how we treat blackness and dark skin, and for someone like Ali to proclaim that, nobody had ever heard that. Right. And I think that's such a powerful statement. When he's saying, "I'm pretty, I'm beautiful, I'm the greatest," that's huge, right? That's reclaiming the body when America is telling you you're not. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful statements that you can make. And last week I was given a presentation. I was in Cleveland, East Cleveland, Bone Thugs and Harmony Cleveland type deal. And I was giving a presentation on Negro Leagues that night. Earlier in the day, they had me speak to kids at school, and we wound up talking about boxing for some reason. It's little kids and everything goes everywhere. And that's one of the things I told them, right? To this idea about self-love and believing in yourself. So, Ali's big for his politics, but I think that's something that everybody could dig, right? This idea that you should love yourself and you should proclaim you're pretty and you're the best. And obviously some of it's braggadocious, but it really means something to a lot of people at that time. But we'll skip to today. And we'll give you two examples of reclaiming the body. One, we'll go with Black women. I think Angel Reese just being vocal about being unapologetic, right? And I think that's so powerful. Now it rubs people the wrong way. And sometimes you might not like this, and that's fine if you're into sportsmanship and stuff. But the way the long eyelash is very, and she's very articulate when she speaks too. But she comes as she is. So during the game, after the game, and I think people have to respect it. I think a lot of people look up to her, and I think someone like Asia Wilson, just her own style with that one leg, but just very being very clear. Recently, when she won the MVP, I think that's huge. Talking about everything that she goes through when it comes to mental health and preparation. And I think, as you brought up today, NIL. One thing I say to people is today, a really good college athlete with NIL and transfer portal are the most free people ever, right? Because you can go anywhere you want. If you're good, you're 20, 22, you have nothing to tie you down, right? Most of us, we're tied down. So let's say my book hits and it's a number one seller and colleges are after me. I'm tied down. I got a mortgage, a real low mortgage because I bought it a long time ago. I'm not, I got kids in a school district. So as great as I might be as a historian, I might sell a lot of books. I'm pretty tied down. But these kids aren't tied down. They're not necessarily owning homes. If they can walk away from it. They don't have a lot of, they might have car payments. So those car payments. But it's that ability to say to somebody, if you treat me wrong, I'm gone, right? You can no longer yell at me. You can no longer, I'm not going to start. I'm gone. And what happened is, if you think about it, before the transfer portal, these college athletes' rights were restricted. Like, the way I think about it is our basic rights, our basic civil rights, even before the Civil Rights Act, is that freedom of mobility. I get to go anywhere I want as an American citizen. And that was restricted because if you wanted to go play at another school, your coach or your school could say, no, we're not going to allow you to go there. But any other American citizen could go there. The other ways their rights are restricted is that right to make money, that right to labor, right? That's the foundation of freedom in the 13th and the 14th Amendment. And when you say you can't earn money, you're essentially taking away those rights. And now they have those rights, and now they can go anywhere they want. And so yesterday, UNLV lost 2 players, the college team. They're 3-0. One of them was a quarterback, I believe he's a white guy, who said, look, in February, when I agreed to play here, you made promises of $100,000. You have not kept those promises. It's clear that you're not going to keep those promises. I'm gone. And then later on, a running back left. And to me, that's power, because they're able to control the situation like they've never been able to control before. There's multiple billions of dollars out there around college sports, and now they're getting it. And if you don't treat them right, you don't live up to their word, they're gone. And very few people have that right, that ability to do that.
Yes, indeed. As you were speaking, I was like, damn, I can't think of any other industry where workers and laborers have that amount of mobility, the way in which you just kind of accounted for us. Wow. Now, I'm still kind of hanging on to like the financial tip of things, specifically around collective bargaining. Um, and then also just the notion of athlete owned teams as well. So you spoke about the Atlanta Dream. Um, but outside of football and basketball, it seems like Black athletes have had a bit more kind of financial agency to kind of participate in ownership of certain teams. When you hear that LeBron is thinking about buying an NBA team, yeah, what comes up for you? Do you feel like this is a step in the right direction? Do you feel like it really means nothing with regards to Black liberation?
On the one hand, for him personally, I think that's awesome, right? To be able to own the way teams are valued at, it's like $1 billion, right? Now, not to get too academic and too problematic, but when we talk about teams now, I think we tend to forget how sometimes they impact cities in a negative way. And so, like, for example, like last week I was in Cleveland, and you go downtown and they have 3 stadiums there. And it's like, okay, you see that big football stadium on, what is it, it's on Lake Erie. And how much home games do they have? 8 home games? Yet the public has to pay for that. And they're trying to get the public to pay more money for a whole other new stadium. And so, what happens is when we're talking about pro ownership, we rarely talk about the public dollars that come with that. And those public dollars that come with all these new stadiums could be used in education. It could be used in creating various structures for, dealing with mental health and everything like that. Now, sometimes some of the money it's private, public, but still it's that public dollars, whatever. If you could go look it up. There's a website, fieldofschemes.com, about all this kind of stuff and all the money that goes into this, whether it's in Miami, Cincinnati, Cleveland, LA, how much public money goes to it. Minnesota Vikings, $1 billion stadium, right? And how much, I think it's up to $1 billion where the public paid for that, which could go other places. So when we talk about ownership, we also have to talk about, well, what does the public lose out of that? Now, the argument for having a new stadium is what? It creates jobs, and it's no knock on that, but what kind of jobs does it create, right? And generally the person who has the stadium job, that's their second job, right? And so now we have a conversation about the economy and everything else like that. But I think sometimes we have to think about what ownership looks like. Now, if LeBron and his people are going to invest their money in that own stadium and do a lot of stuff, then that's, whatever, that's fine. But if we're just using public dollars to give to these private owners, these billionaires, I think that's problematic.
Get softer, smoother, and more even-toned skin after just one use with the new Gentle Exfoliating line from Cetaphil. Formulated with a unique triple acid blend that promotes surface skin cell renewal, these gentle chemical exfoliators remove dead skin cells and refine skin's texture while hydrating, resulting in softer, smoother, more even-looking skin. Shop the new Cetaphil Gentle Exfoliating line in the face and body aisles at your local Target store or online at Cetaphil.com.
It's an election year, and predictably, immigration is in the news, usually framed by the word crisis. So, where are the human-centered stories of migration created by the folks who have experienced it? Enter Movement with Maklit Hadero, a podcast about the intersection of migration and music, focused on the irresistible cultural power of immigrant musicians. Like, subscribe, and follow Movement with Maklit Hadero wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, all right. About to move into our second segment, Lou. Word association. Essentially, I'm going to rattle off some cultural icons within the world of sports, some commercial properties with regards to sports, and some concepts born from the world of sports. And you're not shackled to true or false here. Any word, or kind of want to limit to maybe 5 words with regard to your response here. You ready?
Yep.
All right. The Fab Five.
Oh, this all-time greats. There we go. Bald heads. What they got? Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I'm rattling off their shoes. What's their shoes? Hirachis. Bald heads and Hirachis. There we go.
And long shorts. Yes.
And the long shorts.
Remember the Titans.
Oh, one of the great movies. A great movie talking about integration in school busing too.
Dennis Rodman.
Rebounder.
Tony Stone.
Pioneer.
Deion Sanders.
Oh gosh. I just call him prime time for now. Let's just call him prime time for now.
Copy. OJ.
Man. It's OJ is OJ. Just man. We'll just shake our head on that.
All right. We'll take that. Flojo.
Oh, icon.
The Bayou Classic.
Eddie Robinson. Sorry, I had to. Yeah.
Coach Carter.
Oh man. Richmond. We'll go with Richmond on that one. Yeah.
Ooh. Copy. We're definitely going to circle back and discuss some of these. Thank you. All right. So now I want to discuss another pretty hairy topic. It's about to get pretty heavy, y'all, so get ready. So I want to discuss empire building in the world of sports. I want to think through just global imperial domination, the exercise of power, and how this may take shape through sports. I'm thinking of sports franchises like the New England Patriots, the Washington Commanders, formerly known as the racist trope, the Redskins, and also like the New York Yankees. At a high level, Lou, how do you understand the relationship between empire building and the world of sports?
Okay. All right. So we'll answer this in we'll do it two parts. We'll do it one now, and then one we'll go to the past and talk about colonialism in sport real quick, and say Nigeria. But let's say empire building one. So I think that owners are afraid of themselves in most leagues, and so they put stuff to really stop what most of them are doing. So for instance, if we look at the three major leagues, the NFL, the MLB, and the NBA, the two of those leagues have salary caps. And the reason why they have salary caps is, one, they don't want to pay these players too much, but they do get a lot of money. But also they're just afraid of themselves that they'll spend too much money, right? And so they protect themselves. But there's also they have things in place, and you could say it's empire building where like at the NFL, they don't have a one and done rule in there. They don't have a straight to the league rule in there. And so what they've really done is created we're talking about empires or vertical integration and stuff like that. They've created this kind of free system where they can pull and pluck from anybody. And then there's this draft, right, that they have after college. So to play in the NFL, you have to be at least 3 years removed from high school. Generally, you're going to play, if you're a U.S. base, right? Generally, you're going to play at a college here, 3 years removed, and then you get drafted, but you can't go anywhere. So they've completely restricted people's mobility, right? And they do it in an awful way, right? The draft is a complete restriction of your mobility. They compensate you a little bit, but then you're restricted again because there's no real true free agency in the NFL. So if we watch someone like Lamar Jackson wasn't a free agent last year. He was a free agent, but he also had this tag to him. So if you wanted to sign Lamar, you had to not only pay him, but you had to give the Ravens 2 first-round draft picks, which is really prohibitive to his mobility, right? To how much he can earn and where he can go. So I think in a way that's kind of like empires and how they build through keeping people like just using labor, right? And keeping labor on mobile for lack of better terms, and just the way it's set up. Now baseball doesn't have a cap. Right, they kind of force you some basic spending, but they don't have a cap. So the Yankees are an empire because they will spend, and they have a different TV contract, and so they're always building. And then there's this minor league system again where they restrict money, mobility. Most of those guys who play minor league ball make nothing, right? And so there's a big movement for that, unless you're like a bonus baby. But then I say we talk about empire, like the real empire and colonialism. For a lot of the colonial subjects, like if we go like Nigeria, Ghana, or whatever, sports was essential for how they were going to understand freedom from, let's say, Great Britain. So a great example is if we look at like Nigeria in the 1940s. Soccer was the way they was going to do it. There's the first president, they call him Zeke now, but back then it's Zeke, and he owned a sports athletic club. And he realized that one way they were going to fight for independence was soccer, because this is what soccer does. The way, as we understand, right, if your listeners understand how Africa's carved up Berlin Conference, and they're putting together these colonies without a care in the world for ethnicity, for religion. So somewhere like a vast space like Nigeria, and they wound up having a civil war in the 1960s after independence. Everybody's like different ethnicities, right? And so what Zeke realized, like, one way we can fight independence and show that we're ready is through soccer. Soccer brings us together, right? And so he would have these soccer matches, and they would go from town to town. And so the empire thought they were just playing soccer, but they would play, and then afterwards they would have conversations about independence. What's independence going to look like, right? So Nigeria's independent in 1960, Ghana's independent in 1957. One of the first things they do is start a national soccer teams. They join FIFA. And for them, that showed the modernity in the world. Like, we're a modern nation. Look at us. We have a soccer team. Kwame Nkrumah, who was from Ghana, tries to put an African Cup together, right? Like to unify Africa, right? Understanding that this is how we're going to unify against these colonial powers, is have our own African Cup, right? And then eventually we'll get the World Cup. Or even as messy as and awful, we'll say, as Mobutu is Zaire. Awful. One way he understands independence and showing who you are is via sports. And so Zaire, if you look it up, two big things happened in 1974 in Zaire. One is their team makes it to the World Cup. So they're the first sub-Saharan African team to make it to a World Cup. Now they lose and people mock them. But what he does is early on in like the mid 1960s, he recalls all his players. Now that takes away like the power. I believe a lot of them are playing for Belgium. Now you got to come home, right? Because we're going to build this super team, because this is my model. Through sports, this is how the white gays will understand us. This is how European powers will understand us through being good at sports, right? And now he's, again, restricts mobility. He's awful. We'll call him dictator. The other thing that he does is the one thing we all remember, especially here, Rumble in the Jungle, 1974. Now, obviously, he didn't like it being called the Rumble in the Jungle, right? Because, as he said, like, look, man, this is not a jungle. We're a modern city. But he pays. He's, we can say pays, or steals money from his people to pay for this fight, to give. I think Ali gets 10, Foreman gets 10, and the whole world's eyes is watching Zaire. Now it's like the fights are like 4 a.m. But also, as you see, they have this huge concert. So James Brown is there. You have some global singers there too. You have BB King and stuff like that. And this is just going to be a huge black show. So one way we could talk about empire building, or putting together an empire, or dealing with colonialism or post-colonialism, especially in the context of Africa, is sport. I know this is a long rambling.
No,
so readers that are interested, African Soccerscape is a really good book that talks about, so it's called African Soccerscape. That's a really good book that kind of walks you through the history of Africa and goes over, like, this is how the sport, this is colonialism, how the sport got here. This is how Africans use the sport. This is how they used it to fight colonialism. This is post-colonialism. This is some other stuff. So,
ooh-wee. No, that was a perfect response, Lou. Let me see if I can just latch on to one thread real quick. What immediately came to mind was the work that Lou Alding is involved in with regards to South Sudan, putting together their Olympic team. Do you see that in connection to what we're discussing here? This kind of nation building, this pride building, unification through sports. Do you think that's operating in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. Lou Alding understands that. There's a couple of things. So he's putting together this brand new nation, right? Who's just done with turmoil this whole time, and he's putting these guys are, that team, they're all over the place, South Sudan. He's bringing them together to come together to understand that this is who we are. We're a nation, and at the highest level, being at sports, being in the Olympics means something. And so, look, one of the first, we talked about this, not only did these African nations build like stadiums and soccer teams, like, man, we got to get in the Olympics. So they hire like track coaches and stuff like that. So Mal Whitfield, who U.S. athlete, wins in 1948, 1952, he spends like a decade in Africa coaching these guys and stuff like that. We got to get runners in the Olympics. We got to get boxers in the Olympics. And I think Lou Alding sits in that tradition, right? To unify the nation. But you're also showing the world that you're not backwards, right? Because we love the Olympics, and the world loves the Olympics and sports. And I think it's that them being able to play the U.S. and only lose by one in an exhibition game, and them being able to play at this huge, the biggest stage, right, in the world, shows something. And I think there's a lot of pride going there. There's a lot of ideas about modernity and trying to counteract all these things about backwardness and stuff like that that's going into play there.
Ooh-wee. Okay. All right. Still thinking about Empire. And thank you so much for lifting up some of the generative aspects of how like nation building can take place through sports. Right now, though, I'm kind of stuck on what I perceive as some of the negative ramifications of maybe, I don't know, sports rhetoric. So like this jingoistic kind of fascination that kind of creeps up, this cult-like jingoism that creeps up around sports and sports teams. Why does that happen, Lou? So like, I'm a Saints fan. Family is a Saints fan. Sorry.
Yeah. You had two good games. But yeah.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you. My mom's biting through a lip right now. Yeah. Okay. But no, like we have certain teams that we hate. My mother will often watch the teams that she hates and will root for whoever's playing against them. Now, that's on a very small kind of cultural level, how this kind of operates. But I often feel like it's somehow connected to, I don't know, just like this overly kind of patriotic spirit that we kind of hold here in this country, and how we kind of export that. I mean, shit, we see it in soccer too, you know, across like many different continents. What is that about?
Yeah, I mean, what is the word fans short for fanatics, right? Like you're just, you know, we just love sport. We love to get lost in it, and we love our teams, and we love bragging. And so I think there's nothing wrong unless it crosses the lines. You know, unfortunately, you'll see a lot of fights and stuff like that. People just can't chill. People, you know, are very rude to people at games. And so sometimes you can't even, you know, people don't want to take their families to the games. But I think we just love the association with the team and the city. And so, and that's just who we are. That's who we've been. And I think it starts a lot with the development of college football and alumni associations and bragging rights. And it's just kind of moved on to like professional teams.
Well, quick follow-up. Do you think there's something about the way that we discuss sports in American media, particularly like this rhetoric of domination and aggression? Do you think that could possibly seep into like the imaginary of folks who intake this sort of media, who kind of build their identity through their sports franchises that they root for?
You know, I just think sports is an escape for so much of us. And I think no matter where we are in the timeline of the 19th or 20th century or 21st century, I think a lot of people see it as just an escape. And so they get really wrapped up into it. And their highs and lows are unfortunately based on who they root for. So they should probably be like me and just be a free agent and just follow who you like, right? And so you don't get wrapped up in losing.
Yes, indeed. Oh, that touches on a very interesting thread. Don't even have a question around this, just a quick comment. I do feel like sports fans are kind of shifting their allegiances from like the actual teams and franchises to individual players. Is that something that's striking on your end? Have you noticed this, or do you feel like that's always been there, folks who will root for a player over a team or vice versa?
I think nowadays, just because of like just the growth of gambling and also fantasy sports, right? And so I could watch a game on Sunday and I'll have 4 games up, and now I'm really into like the fantasy sports. Now I root for guys to win and stuff like that, but I don't root against my fantasy team because that's bragging rights. So I think just that, and then people are gambling a lot more often than they probably shouldn't be. And so now they're not necessarily into like their teams, but they're into like, can I make this parlay? Can I win these dollars here?
Okay. Just 2 more questions. Thinking about Empire and sports. I'm curious, are there any moments in history where the public spectacle of sports was used to kind of quell mass dissent? The moment that I'm kind of calling to mind right now is it's a brief window in 2020. This was after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the NBA Players Associations had some discussions around whether or not they would continue the season. And this was like the bubble season, I believe. And during this time, you know, LeBron James spoke about how Obama gave him a call, gave Chris Paul a call, and really discussed why it is they should continue the season, how that may actually give them more political leverage than if they were to halt everything. I'm curious, one, how does that particular incident kind of land with you? And are there any moments where sports has been used by Empire to kind of put down demands for liberation or dissent?
Yeah, so if we take that 2020 inches in the bubble, they probably lost all their leverage once they agreed to play. But they got away with it, and I think it's fine because LeBron and others created more than a vote, right? And that allowed them to kind of have this very apolitical position in a very tight race, right? And so like if we are creating, and I think more than a vote's awesome, right? Because if we're opening access to voting polls, putting voting polls at like Dodger Stadium or in arenas, giving people opportunities so they're not sitting in 8-hour lines and telling people to register to vote, that's fine. And I think that's what comes out of it. But whatever stance they had, whatever play they had to put something towards like these billionaire owners, they lost it when they went back to work. But whatever, like this is what they do, and in the end, that's what they decided to do, right? It's not my life or anything like that, and every team went to it. But if we're talking history, these athletes and sports are used to kind of calm people down. So great example, 67 Detroit has its rebellion in the middle of the Tigers season. So actually Tigers had a home game that day, and Willie Horton, who's not that Willie Horton from the 1980s, Willie Horton, but Willie Horton, the baseball player, he's used to go out there. He gets out in his car, tries to calm people down. They just like boo him off. He's like, "Yeah, I got to get out of here. I got to protect my car." But eventually, games stopped in Detroit, and they go on the road. And it's said that once they go on the road, and they start playing games on TV, people calm down, right? Because people wanted to see the Tigers. Now the Tigers were good that year, but they don't make it. The next year, though, they actually win. They win the World Series. They beat the St. Louis Cardinals, who have like black superstars like Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and some and Kurt Flood, who's in that card right behind me. And it said it unites the city. Now it doesn't really unite the city because Detroit, white flights happening and everything else is going to happen really quickly. But that's the instance. After MLK is assassinated, the sports world completely shuts down for a couple of days, and that's because the black athletes are like, "Yeah, we're not playing." Right. And so we'll have to figure things out. But eventually there's always that pressure to play because people want their minds off of things. Right. And so I think athletes get that all the time. Right. So post 9/11, right, people don't want to play, but eventually you have to play. What does it say? Gets our minds off these things. So sports is always going to be used to kind of relax, calm people down.
Ooh-wee. Okay. All right. There's so much I want to respond to there. We got to move on. Right now I'm thinking about co-opting. So specifically like co-opting black athletes for regressive agendas. Right now, the only kind of proxy I can think of is, and this is really not even coming from the athletes, but Jay-Z's partnership with the NFL and how that was born from Kaepernick's protest. It's fascinating how that morphed into like the spectacle of the Super Bowl halftime show.
That's a good one where kind of Jay-Z steps in and does the bidding for everybody else. That's probably the best example you have that I can think of in modern times. And look, it's Kevin U. Dre and Snoop, and I think this year you get Kendrick Lamar and stuff like that. But the issue was always about Cap, and now it's kind of gone. And the other thing that they did was to make sure they put in racism on the end zone. I think they don't do that anymore, right? And people can have their decals, and the only thing that came out good of that decal, you can't do it anymore. But DeAndre Hopkins, who was a receiver for the Arizona Cardinals at that time, you can look it up. He put on his decal Denmark Vesey. Now, I'm sure that scared the crap out of everybody. But for the first, so if listeners don't know who Denmark Vesey is, he's trying to start the slave rebellion in South Carolina, I want to say, 1822. And so, like, imagine you putting, like, that person's Denmark Vesey on your helmet. But I think what comes good out of that is now for the first time, people actually have to look that up, right? And there's some stories like, okay, this is... So it's a learning moment for folks who Dermot Vesey is, but I'm sure for the NFL, that yeah, we got to stop this. And so you see stuff like, One Love or whatever on the helmets. It's just kind of very neutral stuff. It's a statement that allows them to say stuff. The other thing, 2017, so the year after Cap, so the first year Cap is blackballed from the league, right? So 2016, 2017's out. If you notice, the owners come out on the field and start linking arms with the players, and that kind of quiet stays down because the players like, man, we're going to protest. We're going to, do all this. And the owners, Jerry Jones and all these people who now we find out was like stopping black kids from going to school in 1957. Here it is. They're linking arms and stuff like that.
want to talk a little bit about wealth. Really just kind of one question. We already kind of discussed it at large and through some very specific examples. And in the true or false section, you mentioned that philanthropy may actually be the best way for the Black athlete to contribute to progressive political agendas today. With that said, want to raise up just two very, very specific examples, like initiatives like LeBron James's I Promise School. I'm also reminded of an initiative that was announced. I don't know what they're doing, but Jaylen Brown of the Celtics mentioned that he wants to close the racial wealth gap in Boston. He wants to create another Black Wall Street. Yeah, do you feel like those are like good models to think about, like how Black athletes might use their wealth for progressing?
Yeah, no, look, I love I Promise, right? And so it's one of those things where I think it's a public school, right? I don't know if it's charter, right? Some of these guys have charter schools. I'm like, yeah, this, I'd like to know more about that because the way charter schools operate, taken from the public dollar and stuff like that, and you get like I believe you probably get like 3% of that, so it is a moneymaker right there. And how are you going to complain about education, right? And then it becomes into that traditional American model of kind of pull yourself up now. So Andrew Carnegie, right, comes up with this idea of the gospel of wealth, right? And so Carnegie's this rich multimillionaire. He's a robber baron. He's a crook, but he's rich multimillionaire in the 1880s. And he's like, look, what good is all this money if we're just going to hoard it? But we give it to people, but don't just give it to people. Create ladders, for poor folks to climb up to, right? So it's still that American mentality that you got to pull yourself up by the bootstrap. You got to do that. But here's a ladder. I'll help you out. It kind of fits in that model. So that's good. I don't know what Jaylen Brown, he has to think about that and think about how capitalism is going to impact people. And I think a lot of athletes too, they talk about like just kind of literature and it's just kind of being smart with wealth and money. And sometimes it's not the fact that people don't understand money, it's the fact that they don't have it, right? And so how do you get to that? But I think the best model to me is, brought up the name Kaepernick. And why I say that and why I think philanthropy can be good is that you don't have to have your hand on everything. Maybe sometimes what you have to realize is that there are a lot of groups out there and they know what they're doing. They know their community and they just need funds and funding. And so if you're, this kind of grassroots organizations, and that's what Cap did, when he was raising money, he was giving money to grassroots organizations like, better than I do. And I think if athletes realize that these people on the ground level know better than they do, and they just kind of give their money to them, and obviously they'll have to have some checks and balances and stuff like that, but allow that to happen. And then I think you'll see a larger impact with your dollars.
Thank you so much for putting a rich cap on that. I myself have often kind of perceived a tension between wealth accumulation and how might that lead to greater possibilities with regards to Black liberation. But thank you for just elucidating what CAP was able to do. Absolutely. Finding the folks who are already doing the work and supporting that can be more than enough. Absolutely. But then this leads me to one of our true or false questions. So specifically, I asked, should some athletes just shut up and dribble? Now, when I originally put this in the show notes, it was a bit more explicit than that, the way I wanted to frame it. But only because I'm thinking about like two particular athletes in mind. This may be a bit of a straw man argument, but Kyrie Irving, right? Now, I have sensed that his heart and intentions is in the right place. I don't think he means any harm to anyone. And I can't get over the campaign he was on with regards to being a flat earther. How do you respond when folks say, hey, actually, man, some people should not be speaking out, man? Like, what do you have to say to that, Lou?
So look, I'll say this, and I think we have to be fair here. And that's just your right as a citizen, right? So we have these basic rights, right? And you have this kind of right to say that stuff. Now you have the right to be called out too. And I think what happens is Kyrie got the necessary pushback when it came to Flat Earther, when it came to whatever he did with that DVD. And I think, we're pretty good about that. But he look, if he feels a certain way about politics, he can say that, and he has to understand that he's going to get pushback, and that's his right. And the same thing with someone like Kyle Kuzma. And I don't know what people's politics are, but he seems to be like an RFK guy. And if Kuzma wants to be an RFK guy I think at one point he talked about family values. Like, okay, but if he wants to be that and he wants to put himself out there, then that's fine. And Dandy and people have the right to push back and just to say, you know what, I don't agree with you, and here's why. And same thing with Jonathan Isaacs, as bad as it is, where he was like the only guy who doesn't kneel, and now he's very, he's very anti a lot of these guys, but it's not fair for me to say, yeah, I want you to speak, LeBron, but I don't want you to speak because I don't agree with you. And so what we know, and now it's different now, right? Where 90% of Black folks are Democrat, but back in the day, you would have Democrats and Republicans. And if I told people like, look, Jackie Robinson in 1960 was a Republican, and he was calling people like Hank Aaron Uncle Tom's for going Democrat, right? That's messy, right? And Jackie probably shouldn't have said that but eventually he switches. Like he's like, yeah, I'm done with this party in '64, and that's messy. And Hank should have been able to advocate for JFK if he wanted. Jackie goes Nixon's. So it's there, and then the athlete was always used in that position, right? Like, let's get this person to tout us and stuff like that. But, I just think that people should have the free way to say what they want, especially if it doesn't hurt people. Now, if you're saying stuff that's very hurtful, that's another thing, right? But if your politics, or if you're MAGA and you're Black and you're MAGA, that's on you if you want to put that out there, and if you want to discuss that, but be ready for the pushback, right? And when we push back, just like we could like push back like I'm not going to support you anymore, just like school people. Sauce Gardner's somebody who plays for the New York Jets, going through it right now. It seems like he's been listening to a lot of podcasts lately and figuring himself out, but it's good, right? For these, I just hope that they read and just kind of get educated, because when you read and you get educated, you get Kaepernick, right? And one great example is that, like, Cap didn't really start reading the stuff that he probably should have been reading in college until like that year before, right? Where he was protesting. And then he had this kind of crash course on all this kind of stuff about Black civil rights and Black power and stuff like that. And it changed his mind.
Wow. Okay. This is actually a natural segue into my next question for you. Charles Barkley, in his 90s Nike campaign, claiming that he's not a role model. You mentioned how certain political parties may request the services, the fame, the celebrity, the charisma of certain Black athletes to kind of endorse certain things. And one of our wonderful, brilliant producers here actually asked, like, why is it we even look to athletes like to shape our political opinion? Why do we care what they think politically? With that said, do you feel like it's unfair to hold Black athletes to the standard of being a role model, which I guess Charles was trying to move away from when he did this campaign?
No, I think anybody in the public light is a role model, right? And you always have to be cautious and nowadays you have to be cautious what you post, what you do, because, no matter what, you can say all the time that your parents should be your role model, look up to them, the teachers, whatever. They look up to you and you know it. Because Charles Barkley, my guest, looked up to athletes too, right? And athletes today who say I'm not a role model looked up to athletes. Why is that? Is kind of goes back to just the state of things in Black history, right? Where athletes and entertainers were the only ones who we were allowed to see have something like looks like they could get past Jim Crow, right? Whether you're Nat Cole or you're Jackie Robinson, and so people kind of gravitate towards that, like, okay, this is the person I aspire to be because he's able to rise above all this stuff. And so we just have this kind of fascination with these people still.
Yeah, it's just tough when your heart is broken. Right now, I'm thinking about Deion Sanders. So you mentioned prime time earlier in response to Deion. I'm still feeling the way about his engagements at JSU, Jackson State University, HBCU.
Oh gosh, here we go.
I'm curious, man. I'm like, what do you think about his handling of JSU and some of the pronouncements around race and what he claimed he was intending to do there?
So I think, like, look, Deion's a salesman, and I think Jackson State knew what they were getting into, and Jackson State, to be clear, they brought in like you'd say, probably since you're an HBCU guy, they brought in an outsider, and very few HBCUs ever bring in outsiders for a reason, and outsiders don't really understand the culture. And Deion's an outsider, doesn't understand the culture, doesn't understand what it means to him, doesn't understand like just the place of what the HBCU, that particular one, or all of them meant. He saw it as an opportunity for him to step somewhere else, and he was going to use it. And I also think that JSU understood that. He was the name that they wanted to get, and they were in a path. I forgot now, but if you could probably look it up, they had fired several coaches. And to me, when you're firing several coaches and stuff like that, you're signaling that football is important, and winning is important, and recruiting is important, even though it's very freaking hard to recruit at that level, right? Because you're losing out not only to D1, D2, some other D2s, you're losing out to community colleges and stuff like that. It's very hard to win at that level, and they went that way for a reason. And ultimately, Deion brought him some attention. That attention seems to be gone, and that sense, and then he left them, and that's who Deion was, though. And I think sometimes you have to be cautious of that. Colorado's going to go through that now, and eventually it'll catch up to Deion, right? He's gonna, Travis won't be there, Shadul won't be there, and then we'll see what you got next year if you're around next year.
All right. Moving into our future section, where we like to do a bit of speculation. I'm curious, how do you see the role of the Black athlete in social justice movements evolving in the coming years? Or do you feel like it's pretty static? Is it pretty fixed? Or do you feel like it may kind of shift in the future at all?
I know we're pretty static. I think it's so toxic right now. I think people are kind of figuring out where they just can step in a safe way, is just simply voting and endorsing somebody. So like Jason Tatum the other day, I think he endorsed Kamala. LeBron hasn't endorsed anybody yet or anything like that. But I mean, I think people are just worried about their brand and stuff like that, but also the pushback that comes with that. And I think 2020 was a lot for them, the strike and everything else like that. And so we're at this place where this is what you're going to get every 4 years.
Well, with that said, I'm curious, what lessons do you think the next generation of Black athletes can learn from those who came before them, particularly in terms of balancing their careers, activism, and their personal conviction?
I think that kind of goes away. I think if you watch young kids, you watch social media, everyone's about their brand, everyone's about being on social media all the time. You're not getting any of that, right? And these kids have been nowadays, especially the younger players that you're going to get, and the players coming up now, they just ball two times a day. They train about our brand. They're already getting NIL deals. They're already getting deals for being on Insta, stuff like that. So I think they're really going to be cautious about that. And so we're going to lose a lot of what we had. I think there's that post-Trayvon moment where it seems like, those years from 2012 to 2020 were really impactful. And I think as we move on, we're going to lose a lot of that.
I'm curious how you might respond to folks who say, if Black athletes actually just form their own leagues, and they could control their own narratives, control the profits, then they would be able to engage political issues in a way that won't hurt their brand, because now, like, the Black athletes own this. Do you find any potentialities in that? Is that just kind of wishing upon a star?
We call it Rolls Royce. It's wishing upon a star, right? So no, you know what? Because, if we look at the Negro Leagues, the problem that the Negro Leagues had is that they didn't own anything. And if you don't own anything, if you're not going to own your stadium, you're not going to own any of that, then you're just going to lose. You're just going to be playing 30%, 40% of your profit. And at the same time, you're not going to be political. They're not going to be political, but because they're going to believe is that the political keeps people away, right? So I think you actually wouldn't get that. What you would get was 12, let's say it's a 12-team league. You'll get 12 guys who have a lot of money trying to form these teams, and I just don't think it's going to work.
Okay. I felt that you kind of lit up when I tossed this out there, but the Fab Five, what do you think is the cultural significance of the Fab Five, specifically when thinking about the intersections of Blackness in sports?
Yeah, I mean, one good thing I'll just say is they come as they were, and they brought them full selves to the game, and they didn't really care. No matter how much stuff they got, we're going to wear bald heads, baggy shorts, black socks. We're going to wear our Hirachis and stuff like that. And they talked it and they walked it. And I think for young kids like me growing up, this is just important to see, right? Now your coaches didn't like that, and so you couldn't get away with that. But to see that the possibilities of, how you could play, how you could, just be yourself, I think that was very powerful.
All right. Close us out, Lou. As you know, we are building a Black Liberation playlist this season where we're asking every guest to contribute just one song that is emblematic of the concept of Black liberation for you. Hope we didn't catch you off guard with this one.
Oh, man. Okay. Man, okay. Oh, man. Let me dig. Let's just pull out. Let's see. I probably got a record right here. You know what? We're gonna pull out some PE, some Fear of the Black Planet. We got some of that, like the whole album. Look at what else I got here. We'll just go here. This is for the viewers who don't know. The single. How about that? A little Stetsasonic Africa. So there we go. You know, I got my vinyl bag is deep. I'll just say that growing up, music was a lot better. We had a lot of these stuff, you know, caught me off guard, but the stuff we got to listen to, whether it's PE or even stuff like as problematic as it might have been, the Stop the Violence campaign, the We Are on the Same Gang campaign. I think a lot of these guys were trying to figure it out in real time. And I think you gotta get a lot of beautiful music.
All right, Lou. I'm sorry. I have one last question. I often do this with all our guests. I want to keep tossing questions at you, but I promise this is the last question and we'll let you go. Lou, who is the Great Black Hope?
Okay. So the Great Black Hope is this great book that's already out. It's about the black quarterbacks. So the Great Black Hope, it's about Doug Williams and Vince Evans. So Doug Williams is Grambling, shout out. When he left college in 77, he's the greatest black quarterback ever, or greatest quarterback in college history ever. But I would say this, the hope is about a lot of Black Americans looking at that position and understanding how important a quarterback is. And so in that book, I talk about those guys, Evans and Williams and other black quarterbacks, but the hope is having somebody in that position because that position means something. And I end with the meaning of Doug Williams winning the Super Bowl. And because it's a position of leadership, it's a position of smarts. And for so long, black folks weren't allowed to be in it, but it's not just the athlete. It's the black person that aspires to be something post-civil rights movement. And what happens is a lot of folks will look at these great black college quarterbacks and then not see them not get an opportunity in the NFL and say, you know what, this happens to me, right? Like I don't get an opportunity in life, right? This is what they call the black quarterback syndrome. So it's a book about these two guys, but it's really a book about what that position means. And so, I mean, you guys are Saints fans in this interview. So think about how people were pumped for Aaron Brooks and what Aaron Brooks meant to that team and that city. And you know, as even maybe Jameis a little bit, but I think there's probably, Drew was probably pretty popular because he wins post-Katrina, but Aaron Brooks was something else, I think, for that city. And I think that's probably your first, if I'm correct, that's probably your first black quarterback, right? There and what he meant when he was winning and that team was balling. It was him, Joe Horn, Ricky Williams, but it was Aaron Brooks who really meant something there.
My God. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Warren, for taking time to speak with us. We deeply appreciate you and your expertise. What was that? Oh, my mother has a question for you, Lou.
Okay. Yes.
Final question. What you got, Mom? Who is your football team, Lou? That's what she wants to know.
Man, I'm a free agent. I go where I want. So, you know, I'll say right now, since I'm in Michigan, I like watching the Lions now that they're good. But I watch all black quarterbacks, so I just root for the black quarterback. And so,
yes, indeed. Yeah, she just really was hoping it wasn't the Cowboys.
No. Dak's okay, but you know, you guys beat them, so you know, I'll give them that.
Copy that. All right, fam. We're going to let you get back to it. Thank you again. Got to have you back on. We appreciate you and look forward to checking out The Great Black Hope.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That was the incredible Lou Moore, author, historian, and sports expert. Be sure to check out Moore's latest book, The Great Black Hope, Doug Williams, Vince Evans, and the Making of the Black Quarterback, to learn more about sports and activism. And remember, sports and liberation can exist when we know how to recognize game. What do y'all think? Let us know in the comments of Push Black's Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube pages. Find us and tag us at We Are Push Black. And if you found this conversation valuable, please don't forget to share this episode on your social media too. Until next week, y'all, be free. You're living in history. At Push Black, We agree with Marcus Garvey when he said, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. We believe telling empowering stories on Black life and history can build a more liberated Black future. Being here with us lets us know you probably feel that's important too. You matter. Your choice to be here matters. It lets us know that you value this work. And you make Push Black happen with your contributions at blackhistoryyear.com. Most people do $5 or $10 a month, but everything makes a difference. Thank you for supporting the work. Black History Year is a production of Push Black, the nation's largest nonprofit Black media company. Our team includes Brooke Brown, Amber Davis, Mina Davis, Kevin McFall, Gabby Roberts, and Leslie Taylor Grover. Producing the show, we have Cydney Smith and Lynn Webb, who also edits the show. Black History Year's executive producers are Lilly Workneh and Julian Walker. And I'm your host, Darren Wallace.